8-5. That's Minnesota football, right? Under PJ Fleck, look at the records, average them out. Last season in 2024, 8-5. It seems as though 8-5 is pretty much a landing spot for Minnesota football under PJ Fleck. Well, it could be worse because the program has been generally worse than that since winning a national championship in 1960. So is PJ Fleck getting the job done? Well, to a certain extent, maybe he has maxed out the resources at Minnesota. Maybe somebody else could do a better job, but Minnesota seems to be stuck in the middle of the Big Ten. But 7-5 seems to be the regular season record because Minnesota always wins its bowl game 6-0 under Fleck. Let's look at 2025 and a quarterback change. Max Brosmer brought in from FCS New Hampshire, where he almost won the version of the Heisman there at the Walter Payton Award, but did a fine job with Minnesota and got better as the season progressed. Set a Minnesota school record for completion percentage at 66.5, 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Well, Minnesota said, we've done it once from the state of New Hampshire in that particular university. Why not do it again? Drake Lindsey, been in the program for a year, also followed Brosmer from New Hampshire, but he's just a redshirt freshman at 6'5", 230, a big guy. But don't expect much out of the Minnesota quarterback situation. Consider this. This has to be the biggest drought in major college football. Minnesota has not produced an NFL draft choice at quarterback since 1972, one Craig Curry, and then you've got to go back all the way to 1961 to find the last Minnesota first-team All-Big Ten quarterback, and that would be, of course, Sandy Stevens. And yes, I had to check my notes. I don't have everything in the history of college football memorized. Well, Drake Lindsey, if he falters or if he does not impress to a certain extent in August, may lose the job because you've got a couple guys that have a touch of experience, not much total. Emmett Moorhead, who started some games, count them 5 at Old Dominion and Boston College. But most likely, if Minnesota gets its way in PJ Fleck, it's got to be Drake Lindsey running the show. So expect run-heavy Minnesota, which it should be run-heavy Minnesota. That's what we expect under PJ Fleck. There was a time in which, after 5 or 6 seasons of PJ Fleck football at Minnesota, only the service academies and Georgia Tech at that point under Paul Johnson's influence had run the ball more than Minnesota. But in 2024, they relied more on the passing game with a couple nice receivers in Elisha Spencer and Daniel Jackson, but expect the run game to be prominent. And they've got an excellent one in all Big Ten back, Darius Taylor, just under 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns last season. A.J. Turner, they brought him in as a reinforcement from Marshall, 864 yards. And keep in mind, Darius Taylor out of the backfield, 54 catches, also a game winner against UCLA. Cam Davis, much heralded at one point, went to Washington and gained over 1,000 yards in his career, but has really not carried the ball too much since a 500-yard season in 2022. Cam Davis provides insurance there at running back. And if you remember Minnesota back play under PJ Fleck, one season in particular, they went 5 deep. They went to their 5th tailback, and that dude was still running for 150 yards a game. Okay, wide receiver plays got to get better in regards to the guys that are stepping in for guys that produced last season. Not cutting on Daniel Jackson or Elisha Spencer. The aforementioned duo gained 127 catches last year, but they've moved on. So we got Malachi Coleman coming in from Nebraska, Logan Loya out of UCLA, and those two guys, especially Malachi Coleman, much acclaimed coming out of high school. Let's see if he can reach his potential. The offensive line has some experience coming back, but they lose by far their best in Erante Ursary, a second-round draft pick. Then also we've got Ashton Beers, who made 9 starts at center last year. Marcellus Marshall comes in with 35 starts of experience, but those at Kent State and UCF. And then we've got Greg Johnson with 13 starts at Minnesota. So the offensive line has been a strength under PJ Fleck. So the Minnesota offensive line we would project to be pretty much in its standard spot of mid to top tier in the Big Ten. The defense has been much better than that. Number 5 in the nation last year in total defense. Number 9 in scoring defense. Now, some of that has to do with style of play. We get it, but still the defense has been exceptional for the most part, even with defensive coordinator changes. And now Minnesota's going to have to undergo another one. Corey Heatherman lured away by money to Miami. replaced by Danny Collins. Now, Danny Collins has never been a defensive coordinator, but he and PJ Fleck must work well together because he's been on the Minnesota staff for 9 years and worked with PJ Fleck now for 13 seasons. So he's the new DC, and he's going to have to work with a ton of new personnel. At cornerback, the 3 top guys are gone, but the guys that remain have started 10 games in the Power 4. That includes Aiden Gooseby, 23 tackles and a pick. Zaquan Brown, 19 tackles and a pick. And then also Jalen Bowen comes in from North Carolina Central. The safety position might be the best position, not just on the defense, but on the team, unless somebody else emerges elsewhere. Coy Parrish is one of the best, 46 tackles, 5 picks. Kerry Brown, 63 tackles, 3 tackles for loss and 2 interceptions. The front 7 depleted. Really, the guys that are the stalwarts that are coming back with much experience would be middle linebacker Maverick Baranowski, 65 tackles, 4 TFLs, and the weak side linebacker in Devin Williams, 44 tackles and 2 behind the line of scrimmage. In the place-kicking department, Minnesota got its 2024 season off to a dubious start by missing a field goal at the gun, which lost the game against North Carolina. But they will have nobody coming back at place kicker or punter. They've got pretty much an audition across the board. They do have a guy coming in from Syracuse who may have the lead at place kicker. Now let's check out the schedule and see if there's a path to 7-5. Of course there's a path to 7-5, but could there be anything better for the Golden Gophers? Well, it starts out with a tricky opener at home on a Thursday night against Buffalo, 9-4 last season, and of course Minnesota has that dubious distinction of struggling against MAC teams, also losing to Bowling Green even during a 9-4 season. Week 3, they go to Cal. That should not necessarily be an easy assignment, although the Golden Bears finished 6-7 last year. Remember Fresno State several seasons ago when Minnesota took one of their best teams out there. I believe it was the 2019 team that finished 11-2, and they had to pull one out in the final seconds of that game on a 4th and long. And Cal's a pretty depleted football team, but again, difficult trip to the West Coast in Week 3 to take on Devin Brown and Cal. Big Ten schedule includes no Penn State, no Michigan, no USC, and of course the Gophers won that game at home last year. They took Michigan down to the wire. They took Penn State down to the wire. This was a really good 8-5 football team last year when it was all said and done. Really, nobody handled the Gophers besides Iowa. Now, it's all going to come down to all these mid-tier 50-50 type games. Minnesota basically has 6 of those if we take out the heavyweights, which includes Ohio State and Oregon. Take those out. Take out Purdue. That's got to be a win. And the other 6 are generally in that 50-50, 60-40 toss-up range. Despite being the better football team against Buffalo and also against Cal, I believe Minnesota might trip up. We've got to pick our spots because the group of 5 does win about 15 to 18% of these matchups against the Power 5. So Minnesota trips up once during the non-conference play, 5-4 in conference play, and lo and behold, if nothing else, PJ Fleck is consistent. 7-5, and hey, I'm going to bank on them winning another bowl game. Your thoughts about Minnesota football? Keep in mind that we go live with you every Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the College Football Show. We will see you then.